The Russian sleep experiment is a widely known urban legend, but it has been passed down as though it were a true story. Here is a narrative based on that legend. The Russian sleep experiment. A descent into madness. In the late 1940s, during the height of the Cold War, Soviet researchers began a top-secret project deep in the frozen Siberian wilderness. The goal was to find a way to keep soldiers awake for days on end without suffering any physical or mental deterioration. They devised an experiment that would push the boundaries of human endurance and sanity. 5 political prisoners, enemies of the Soviet state, were selected to participate. In exchange for their freedom, they agreed to be confined in a sealed chamber where a stimulant gas would keep them awake for 30 days. The researchers believed that this prolonged wakefulness would not only sharpen their minds, but also create a new breed of soldier, one that would need no sleep. The prisoners were promised their freedom if they complied for the full duration of the experiment. The room was stocked with basic necessities, books, cots, running water, and food to last over a month, but the gas was constantly pumped into the chamber to ensure they would not fall asleep. The room was fitted with microphones and a two-way mirror, so the scientists could monitor the subjects at all times. At first, everything went as expected. The prisoners were talkative and cooperative, discussing their pasts and future plans. But after the 3rd day, the conversations became darker. Paranoia began to set in. The prisoners spoke less and stared blankly into space. The effects of sleeplessness became more evident as they started showing signs of agitation, pacing the room and whispering to themselves. By the 5th day, things took a sinister turn. One of the prisoners started screaming uncontrollably for hours, tearing at his throat until he was left hoarse and bleeding. Instead of reacting to him, the others seemed oddly detached, as if they couldn't hear his desperate cries. They began to act erratically, tearing apart the books and smearing the pages with feces, covering the windows so the researchers could no longer observe them. The scientists, concerned but curious, continued the experiment. They maintained audio surveillance, but after the 10th day, the room fell completely silent. The researchers assumed the subjects had finally fallen asleep. They debated whether to open the chamber to investigate, but decided to wait another day. On the 15th day, unable to bear the silence any longer, the researchers initiated a protocol to open the chamber. As the airlock hissed open and the stimulant gas dissipated, they were greeted by a scene that haunted their nightmares for years to come. The prisoners were no longer recognizable. Their flesh had been shredded as if they had attacked themselves in a frenzy of madness. Blood smeared the walls and floor, and the remains of torn skin and muscle were scattered around the room. 2 of the prisoners were already dead, their bodies mutilated beyond recognition. The 3 who were still alive were in a horrifying state. Their eyes were wide open, bloodshot, and staring into the void. One man had torn his own abdomen open, exposing his organs, but somehow still alive. He begged the researchers to turn the gas back on, his voice raw and desperate. "We need it," he whispered. "We don't want to sleep anymore." The surviving prisoners resisted any attempt to leave the chamber, violently attacking the guards who tried to subdue them. They seemed to possess inhuman strength, driven by some unnatural force. When asked why they had harmed themselves, one prisoner responded with a chilling smile. "We are the madness. It's inside all of us. We wanted to keep it out, but now, it's all we are." The experiment was abruptly halted. The surviving subjects were euthanized after violent attempts to contain them failed. Official records of the experiment were sealed, buried deep within Soviet archives. The few scientists who worked on the project either vanished or were silenced, their knowledge of the incident hidden from the world. But rumors persisted, whispered among the Russian scientific community for decades. Some believed the experiment had opened a door to something darker within the human psyche, something primal, waiting to be unleashed when sleep, the last refuge of the sane mind, was taken away. The Russian sleep experiment remains one of the most disturbing stories of psychological horror. Whether myth or truth, it serves as a reminder of the terrifying consequences that can arise when science dares to tamper with the boundaries of human endurance. Sleep paralysis is a terrifying phenomenon where a person becomes conscious but is unable to move, often accompanied by frightening hallucinations. While it's a well-documented experience, The following 3 stories highlight just how disturbing it can be when combined with nightmarish visions. 1. The shadow man Lisa had been dealing with sleep paralysis sporadically throughout her life, but one incident shook her to her core. It was a warm summer night when she woke up frozen in her bed. At first, she recognized the sensation. Her body was completely immobile, though she was fully aware of her surroundings. But this time was different. She heard a faint shuffling sound near the foot of her bed. Unable to move or cry out, Lisa's eyes darted toward the corner of the room, where a tall, dark figure loomed. The figure was featureless, just a silhouette darker than the night itself, but it was undeniably watching her. Slowly, it began to move closer. The weight of dread pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. The shadow man moved with deliberate slowness, creeping to the side of her bed until he was standing right next to her. She could feel his presence, cold, oppressive, and malevolent. Then he bent down. His face, or where his face should have been, was inches from hers. Lisa could hear a faint, rasping breath as though he was breathing directly into her ear. Unable to scream or escape, she was forced to lie there, paralyzed and helpless. Suddenly, the figure leaned in further and whispered something unintelligible into her ear. The sound felt like static, but she couldn't understand a word of it. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the figure straightened and walked backward, melting into the shadows at the edge of the room. When Lisa regained control of her body, she shot up in bed, drenched in sweat. She had experienced sleep paralysis before, but the sensation of being watched by that shadow figure haunted her for weeks afterward. Every night she dreaded going to sleep, afraid the figure might return. The old hag Darren had never experienced sleep paralysis until one night in his mid-20s, when he woke up to the horrifying sensation of being unable to move. At first he felt the familiar weight of sleep pressing down on his limbs, but soon he realized something was terribly wrong. The room around him was dimly lit by the moonlight filtering through his blinds. His eyes scanned the room, his body frozen in place when he suddenly felt the bed dip beside him, as though someone had just sat down. A cold rush of fear swept over him and his heart began to race. Then he saw her. An old woman, hunched and grotesque, was sitting at the edge of his bed. Her hair was matted, her skin pale and wrinkled. She was grinning, her mouth filled with jagged, rotting teeth. Slowly, she turned her head toward Darren, her eyes milky white and devoid of life. She began to crawl toward him, her skeletal fingers digging into the mattress as she moved. Darren tried to scream, but no sound came out. His throat felt tight, as if something were strangling him. The old woman crept closer and closer until she was right on top of him. Her face inches from his, she let out a low, rasping chuckle, her breath smelling of decay. And then she pressed her bony hands down on his chest, pinning him further into the bed. Darren's chest felt like it was being crushed, and he struggled to breathe. The old woman's grin widened, and her eyes seemed to glow with sadistic glee. He could feel her weight pressing down on him, as though she was trying to suffocate him. Just as he felt like he couldn't hold on any longer, she vanished. In an instant, the pressure lifted and Darren could move again. Gasping for breath, he sat up in bed, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked around the room, but the old hag was gone. Yet the memory of her face, her eyes, and the weight on his chest stayed with him long after. 3. The suffocating presence. Jess had read about sleep paralysis but never thought she'd experience it herself. One night, after staying up late studying for exams, she finally collapsed into bed. Not long after, she woke up feeling like something was wrong. She couldn't move. Her entire body felt glued to the mattress, her muscles unresponsive. Her eyes were wide open and she could see her darkened bedroom clearly. The door was closed and everything seemed normal, except for the intense feeling of dread that washed over her. Then she heard it, a low, guttural breathing coming from the corner of her room. It sounded like something huge, something dangerous was standing just out of sight. Jess tried to turn her head, but her body wouldn't obey. The breathing grew louder, closer. She could feel its presence now. Something heavy and malicious in the room with her. Suddenly she felt an invisible weight press down on her chest, as if someone or something was sitting on her. It was crushing, suffocating. Her breaths became shallow, panic rising as she struggled for air. And then she saw it. A dark, indistinct figure began to take shape at the foot of her bed. It had no features, no face, just a black void where a person should be. The figure moved slowly, crawling onto the bed, its weight increasing the pressure on her chest. Jess could hear its labored breathing, feel its presence growing heavier and more oppressive as it crawled closer. It leaned over her, its face, or lack of one, hovering inches above hers. Jess felt her heart pounding in her ears, her vision starting to blur from lack of oxygen. The pressure was unbearable, and she thought she was going to suffocate. Just as the crushing sensation became too much to bear, she gasped and woke up fully. The figure, the pressure, everything was gone in an instant. She sat up, panting, her heart racing. Though she was free, the suffocating feeling and the memory of that faceless figure haunted her every time she tried to sleep after that night. For weeks, Jess dreaded going to bed, terrified that the presence would return. Sleep paralysis became a recurring nightmare for her, and each time the suffocating darkness felt more real.
The endless night. Emma had always heard about sleep paralysis, but she never believed it could happen to her. The stories of people waking up, trapped in their own bodies, unable to scream, while shadowy figures loomed over them, seemed like nothing more than urban legends. But one cold night, Emma found out the truth in the worst way possible. It started like any other evening. She stayed up late studying, then climbed into bed, exhausted. As soon as she closed her eyes, sleep claimed her. But something was off. She dreamed of a cold, empty room with walls that stretched endlessly into the darkness. There were no doors, no windows, only shadows that clung to the corners, moving like they were alive. She felt a presence watching her, just out of sight. When she tried to move, her body wouldn't obey. Her eyes were the only things that could move, scanning the room frantically. Panic set in as she realized she was in the throes of sleep paralysis, something her friends had told her about in hushed tones. But this wasn't a fleeting nightmare. A low whisper echoed through the void. "You can never leave." Her heart raced, the words reverberating inside her skull. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped. Then, out of the corner of her vision, she saw them. Dark figures creeping along the walls, their hollow eyes fixed on her. They moved closer, their faces featureless, like silhouettes burned into her mind. Their presence was suffocating, a pressure she couldn't escape. "You can never wake up." The voice hissed again, now louder, more sinister. She desperately fought to wake herself, willing her limbs to move, to scream, to do anything. But it was as if something stronger was holding her in place, trapping her within the dream. Hours passed. Or was it days? Time lost all meaning in this place. The shadowy figures circled her, their whispers filling her mind with one terrible truth. The only way to escape is to never sleep again. Suddenly, she snapped awake in her bed. Or so she thought. Her room looked normal, her familiar surroundings returning. But something was wrong. The air felt thick, like she was still inside the dream. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror and saw the shadows clinging to her, slowly creeping up her legs and arms. She wasn't truly awake. This was another layer of the nightmare, and she had no way of knowing how deep she had gone. Terrified, she tried staying awake. Coffee, energy drinks, anything to keep her from falling asleep. But exhaustion crept in faster than it should have. Every time she blinked, she saw them. The shadows waiting in the corners, their lifeless eyes watching her, waiting for her to slip. Days blurred together. She couldn't sleep. She mustn't sleep. But every time she stayed awake, the hallucinations grew stronger. The walls of her room seemed to close in, her reflection smiled when she wasn't smiling, and the whispers never stopped. "You can never leave." As sleep deprivation set in, she started seeing the shadows even when she was awake. They whispered in her ear, their presence always near, reminding her of the one thing she couldn't escape. They wanted her back in the dream. They were waiting. And then, After nearly a week without sleep, her body couldn't take it anymore. She collapsed into her bed, too exhausted to fight any longer. As soon as her eyes closed, she was back in the endless dark room, with the shadows circling her once again. This time, there was no waking up. The last thing she heard, before the darkness swallowed her whole, was the voice's final whisper. "We told you. You can never leave." Emma was trapped, caught in a dream with no escape, doomed to wander the endless night for eternity. And in the waking world, her body remained still, as if she were just sleeping. Forever. Her only way out was to never sleep again, but she had lost that battle. Now she belonged to the shadows. It was a quiet night when Mia fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. The kind of sleep that comes after a long, grueling week. But as the hours passed, she suddenly found herself in that unsettling state. The moment when your mind is awake, but your body refuses to follow. Mia's eyes fluttered open, and she could see the faint glow of moonlight through the curtains. She wanted to move, to stretch, to reach for her phone. Anything. But her body remained completely still. A heaviness pressed down on her chest, making it difficult to breathe. She could feel her heartbeat quicken, thumping in her ears. But still, she could not move. Then she noticed it. In the corner of her room, by the door, a shadowy figure stood. It wasn't fully formed, more like a vague silhouette. But it was there. Tall, looming, watching. Her breath hitched as the air in the room grew colder, a chill creeping across her skin. Her mind raced with thoughts, but none of them could form a coherent sentence. "What is that?" she thought. "Who is that?" The figure didn't move. It just stood there, as though waiting for something. Mia's pulse quickened even more, her throat tightening. She tried to scream, tried to call out to her mother, but no sound escaped. Her voice was trapped inside her, just like the rest of her body. Then, slowly, the figure took a step forward. Each movement was deliberate and slow, as if savoring the terror it was causing. Mia wanted to turn her head, to look away, but her neck was frozen, locked in place. The figure drew closer, now only a few feet away. Mia's chest felt as though it was being crushed under the weight of 1,000 bricks. She could see the outline of something more disturbing now. Something in the shape of a face. But it wasn't quite right. No eyes, no mouth. Just a hollow, featureless visage. It was almost as if the darkness itself had come alive, taking form to haunt her. The figure reached out, a long, skeletal hand stretching toward her. She could feel the coldness of its fingers, even though they never touched her skin. They hovered just above her chest, brushing the edge of her blanket. The room grew darker, the air thicker. Mia's heart raced faster, her vision beginning to blur, her chest heaving with desperate breaths. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the figure vanished. The pressure in her chest lifted, and her body was released from the paralysis. She shot up in bed, gasping for air, her skin slick with sweat. The room was empty. No figure, no coldness, just the soft hum of her bedside clock ticking away. But as Mia lay there, trying to calm her breath, a faint whisper echoed in her ear. "Sleep. Again." She whipped her head around, but there was no one there. Only silence. The sleep paralysis wasn't over. It had only just begun. It was supposed to be just another night. The kind where you go to sleep, the world fades away, and you wake up in the morning, your mind refreshed and your body rested. But I should have known that something was wrong the moment I laid down. Something in the air felt heavy, thick with an oppressive weight that I couldn't shake off. I tried to brush it off as just the stress of my job catching up with me, But that night, everything changed. I woke up, but not in the way you usually do. I didn't open my eyes and stretch, feeling the comfort of the blankets around me. No, I woke up trapped. My body felt like lead. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even blink. It was like my mind was wide awake, but my body had been left behind, paralyzed in some cruel, twisted sleep. My heart began to race. Panic set in. I tried to move my fingers, my toes, anything, but nothing. Just the crushing weight of immobility pressing down on me, suffocating me. My breath quickened, shallow gasps escaping my mouth as I struggled, my body betraying me. My vision swam with the darkness of the room, and I could feel the stifling silence, thick and oppressive. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought it was a trick of my mind, the darkness playing games with my eyes. But no. There, in the far corner of the room, he sat. A man. A figure so out of place in my bedroom that it took me a moment to comprehend what I was seeing. He was sitting in the old wooden chair by the window, his legs crossed in an unnatural, almost contorted way. His clothes were old-fashioned, like something from a different time. A dark suit, torn in places, frayed at the cuffs. But it wasn't his clothes that held my attention. It was his face. I tried to look away. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My eyes were locked on him, held captive by some invisible force. His face was wrong, twisted, his smile. It was unnatural, grotesque. It stretched too wide, far too wide, like someone had pulled the edges of his lips until they couldn't stretch any further. His skin was tight, stretched over his bones like a mask, and his eyes— God, his eyes. They were wide open, unblinking, black as coal, and staring directly at me with an intensity that made my heart stop. He tilted his head to the side, slowly, as if studying me. The motion was jerky, unnatural, like a broken puppet. I could hear the subtle creak of the chair beneath him, the only sound in the room, and it felt like the air itself had thickened, become oppressive, like I was drowning in it. He was judging me. The thought crashed into my mind with a jolt, and I felt my body stiffen further, paralyzed not just physically, but mentally, as if I was suddenly trapped in a moment that I couldn't escape from. His gaze bored into me, cold, malicious. He wasn't just looking at me. He was inside me, peeling away the layers of my thoughts, my very soul. Then he smiled again. That smile, too wide, too wrong. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg. But my mouth wouldn't move, my throat frozen. The air around me seemed to thicken with the weight of his presence. And then he laughed. It wasn't just a laugh. It was something else. It started as a low chuckle, like a distant echo from somewhere deep within the earth. It reverberated through my bones, rattling my insides. But it wasn't just a sound. It was a sensation. A presence. The laugh crawled inside my head, filling every corner of my mind with its vile, mocking tone. It was so deep, so wrong, that I felt my own thoughts being drowned, overtaken by it. It wasn't a laugh I could escape from. It felt like it was coming from the inside of my skull, like he was controlling my thoughts, feeding on my fear, savoring every moment of my terror. The sound of it filled the room, so loud and so real that I felt my very being consumed by it. And then, it changed. The laugh grew louder, more intense, more alive. It filled the space around me, swelling and rising in pitch, becoming more twisted, more mocking. It wasn't just the sound, it was the feeling of it. It was cold, cutting through me like a blade, scraping against my nerves, infecting my mind with the purest form of dread. I couldn't escape it. I don't know how much time passed. Minutes? Hours? It felt like days. Each moment dragged on in a slow, suffocating crawl. The laugh echoed in my mind, vibrating through my very soul. I could feel it against my skin, cold and seeping in like the shadow of death itself. And then, just when I thought I would lose my sanity, when I thought I would scream until my voice shattered, it stopped. The laughter, the presence, the feeling of being consumed, it all vanished, as if nothing had ever been there at all. I snapped out of it, gasping for air, heart pounding so hard I thought it would break free from my chest. I could move again. My limbs, once frozen, were now trembling with the aftershocks of the terror I'd just endured. But it wasn't over. It was never over. I looked around the room, frantic, expecting him to be there, sitting in that chair, watching me with that damnable smile. But the chair was empty. The room was still. Quiet. Too quiet. I could feel my own breath, harsh and ragged, in the silence. I told myself it was over, that I had imagined it, that it was just another horrible dream. But even as I lay there, trying to convince myself of this, I could still hear it. That laugh. Faint at first, just a whisper in the back of my mind. But it was there. And every time I closed my eyes, it grew louder, as if he were waiting for me to drift back into the paralysis, to become trapped in the nightmare once again. It hasn't stopped. I thought the worst was over, that I could go back to my normal life. But I was wrong. Every night, when I try to sleep, the laughter is waiting for me. Sometimes I hear it in the quiet of the house, as though it's lurking just beyond the corner of the room. Other times, I hear it when I'm alone, the sound curling around my thoughts like a vine. The worst part? It's in my head. It's always in my head. I hear it more and more now. The laughter, the mocking, hollow laugh that tells me he's still here, that he's waiting. And when I close my eyes, I can still see him. That smile, wide and wrong. That head, tilted at a sickening angle. I can feel him watching me, judging me. I know it's only a matter of time before I wake up again, before I find him sitting in that chair, waiting, laughing. And next time, I won't escape. Next time, he'll take me.